The September 3rd military parade was approaching fast, and as the daughter of a fallen soldier, I returned to Washington, D.C. to represent my father, Captain Benetta, national hero, who sacrificed everything for his country. In my arms, I carried the last two things left of him, a shattered urn of ashes and a first-class Medal of Honor, his final proof of service. His suicide note was still fresh in my mind, his shaky handwriting begging me to go through with a childhood engagement arranged between him and General Carter's familia bond meant to be sealed through my marriage to Ethan Carter, the son of the Carter family. I didn't expect a warm reunion. We hadn't seen each other in nearly 20 years, and I was only here out of respect for my father's dying wish. But the moment I stepped out of the car, everything spiraled into a nightmare. A sleek, growling motorcycle came flying around the corner, swerved recklessly, and slammed into me. The impact knocked the urn from my hands, and I watched in horror as it crashed onto the pavement, scattering my father's ashes across the cold concrete. Before I could even react, the Reborn woman in designer sunglasses with an attitude sharp enough to cut steel climbed off her bike, spat in the direction of the ashes, and sneered. "Are you blind? Do you even realize what you've done to my car?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My voice trembled, but I tried to keep it steady as I replied, "Ma'am, you crashed into the remains of a national hero. Do you even understand what that means?" Her eyes rolled so hard I thought they'd get stuck. "So, what if he was a soldier? Today's Ethan's birthday party, and I'm not letting your pile of scrap metal ruin my moment. This bike is a limited edition Dodge Tomahawk worth over $10 million. It's a gift from Ethan Carter to his future wife. That's me. You scratched it with your junk, so pay up or better yet don't bother because none of your family is walking out of D.C. alive if I say so." My heart was thundering. My fists clenched. The shattered ashes on the ground looked so small, so helpless, and I felt powerless, ashamed, and boiling with rage. "You want to talk about damage?" I hissed, pointing at the crushed metal lying under her tires. "You destroyed a first-class Medal of Honor. That's priceless. That's sacred." But she only laughed, flicking ash from her cigarette and, with complete audacity, tapped the remains of the urn with the tip like it was an ashtray. "Even if I hit you, so what? This is Ethan City. The Carter family controls everything here. If you had any brains, you'd get lost before he shows up. Because if Ethan gets here, you won't just be kneeling, you'll be buried." My father's last instructions to me were to stay calm, avoid conflict, and never tarnish his name, but I couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't just an accident, it was a deliberate desecration of his memory. When she laughed again, loud and mocking, I snapped. I put my entire military strength into a slap that knocked her straight to the pavement. The crowd gasped. Phones came out. Cameras rolled. Someone whispered, "Isn't that Vanessa Collins? Ethan Carter's secretary?" Another voice said, "That's his custom motorcycle. She must be his fiancée." My blood ran cold, but I stood tall. Vanessa rose slowly, clutching her cheek and spitting blood, her eyes murderous. "You just signed your own death certificate," she growled. "I'll make sure Ethan ruins you. Let's see how far that medal takes you when the Carters blacklist your entire bloodline." Just then, the crowd stirred. Whispers turned into a wave of hushed excitement. "President Carter is here," someone shouted. Ethan Carter walked out of the Carter Group building with all the arrogance of a man who thought the world owed him something. In a tailored suit, perfectly groomed, tall and striking, he looked every bit like the heir to a billion-dollar empire. If I had known the truth of what kind of man he really was, I might have believed the Prince Charming illusion. He rushed to Vanessa, wiped the blood from her lip gently like a concerned boyfriend, and said in a low, doting voice, "Vanessa, why didn't you call me sooner? Didn't I tell you, as long as I'm here, no one in D.C. is allowed to touch you?" Then he turned to me like I was filth under his shoe. "You must be Claire Bennett, the so-called fiancée my father arranged. I was going to end the engagement with a generous payout. But now that you've touched Vanessa, you'll pay for it another way." He didn't even glance at the crushed metal or the spilled ashes. He was too busy staring at the scratches on his girlfriend's bike. "This is a one-of-a-kind Dodge Tomahawk. Even a scratch means it's totaled. Because of the long-standing friendship between our families, I'm being kind. Just pay $1 million, and we'll call it even." Otherwise, get out of DC. No one here wants you. His words echoed in my ears like poison. I had returned home to honor my father. I carried his legacy, not for money or favors, but for pride. And here they were, treating him like garbage, like he died for nothing. My voice shook, but I forced every word through gritted teeth.
Fine.
I'll pay the 1 million. But you destroyed my father's Medal of Honor. That honor can't be bought. How will you compensate for that? The crowd murmured. A few gasps. Did she say Medal of Honor? Is she here for the September 3rd ceremony? Wait, does that mean she's military? Vanessa picked up the shattered medal mockingly, flashed it to the onlookers, and sneered. First-class medal? So what? My shoes cost more. You think this earns you some kind of royalty treatment? I'll give you double the severance pay. Call it $600,000. Happy now? I stood frozen, blood roaring in my ears. Ethan added, enough. Stop pretending to be some martyr's daughter just to scam the Carter family. This is the last time I show you mercy. My hands were trembling as I dialed a number I had sworn not to use unless absolutely necessary. It rang once. Then a firm voice answered. Claire? Is everything all right? It was General Richard Carter, me godfather, my mentor, my father's comrade-in-arms. My voice cracked as I spoke, holding back the tears. Uncle Richard, someone desecrated Dad's ashes. They crushed his medal. And they're threatening me unless I pay $1 million in cash within 30 minutes, or they'll let a guard dog defile what's left. There was silence on the line. Then a sharp, controlled voice. Send me your location. Right now. I obeyed. Vanessa was already laughing with the Carter guards, twirling the leash of a snarling dog and kicking at the ashes again. You've got 20 minutes left, babe, she taunted. Clock's ticking. Better go beg your sugar daddy or a loan shark. But I didn't move. I stood my ground, bleeding from my palm where I clutched the broken metal pieces, waiting. Because I knew what was coming and they had no idea just how much hell was about to descend on them. 15 minutes later, the street outside Carter Group was no longer just a street. It looked like a scene straight out of a military-grade action film. Sirens wailed in the distance, but not the kind from police cruisers. A full-scale military convoy roared down the avenue, followed by an armored transport vehicle and, yes, literal tanks, actual tanks flanking the Carter Group, building like it was enemy territory. The crowd gasped, phones rose into the air like a sea of blinking eyes, and the tension shifted so fast you could feel the air drop 10 degrees. Vanessa, who had been mocking me mercilessly just moments ago, froze in place, still holding the dog leash, as a sleek black Hongqi car pulled up to the front and screeched to a halt. Out stepped General Richard Carter, dressed in full military uniform, every inch of his chest decorated with medals that gleamed like battle cries. His eyes swept over the scene, lingering for a long, painful moment on the ashes at my feet, on the shattered fragments of my father's medal still clenched in my bloody hand, and then moved slowly, terrifyingly to Ethan and Vanessa. He raised a hand, and in seconds, 4 elite soldiers descended to surround me protectively, weapons holstered but ready. One of them saluted and whispered, Miss Bennett, we're under direct orders from the general. You're the priority. Ethan took a step back. Vanessa stuttered, the leash slipping from her fingers. This is insane. That's Commander Carter. Why is he? Silence. General Carter barked, his voice booming across the stunned silence. Then he turned to me. Claire, tell me everything, word for word. My throat tightened, but I forced it out. I told him about the motorcycle, the urn, the crushed metal, the public humiliation, the $1 million ransom, the countdown, and the threat to let dogs desecrate what was left of my father's remains. With every sentence, his face darkened, jaw clenched, so tight, I thought it might snap. You asked for $1 million in cash? He asked coldly, turning to Vanessa. And threatened to feed a soldier's ashes to a dog? Vanessa backed up, trembling. Didn't know. I thought she was just some scammer. She never said what, he snapped. That her father is Captain William Bennett? That he threw himself on a live grenade to save 7 scientific researchers? That the ashes you kicked belong to a hero who gave everything to this country, including his life? Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but General Carter silenced him with a glare.
You.
Shut your mouth. You let your so-called fiancé trample a national hero's memory just to protect your ego. Then he turned to his aide. Bring the money. All of it.
Cash.
Stack it on the hood of that damn motorcycle. If they want $1 million, they'll get it, but only if they survive taking it. The armored vehicle rumbled forward, and a reinforced case was dragged out, stacks of bills packed like gold bricks. I watched Vanessa's eyes widen with pure greed and pure terror. It was poetic. But it wasn't over. Surround the building, General Carter ordered. No one leaves without my say. Especially them. Vanessa turned ghost white. Ethan looked like someone had slapped the entitlement out of him. But I wasn't finished either. My voice didn't shake this time. General, they not only insulted my father, they accused me of using his death to extort the Carter family. They mocked the medal he bled for and humiliated me publicly. This isn't just about might, it's about every soldier who ever died for this country. General Carter's jaw tightened. And that's why the military is here. He stepped forward, eyes blazing. Vanessa Collins, you are under investigation for desecrating a military relic, publicly insulting a fallen soldier, and extorting a family member of a decorated war hero. You are not going anywhere. Ethan finally snapped out of his daze. Wait, you can't arrest her, she's my secretary. She didn't mean it. It was all a misunderstanding. Oh, so now it's a misunderstanding? I said coolly, stepping toward him. You demanded I pay $1 million for your toy bike while stepping over my father's ashes. You looked me in the eye and told me this city didn't welcome me. You offered to buy out our engagement like it was a bad investment. Now you want to play the good guy. He had the audacity to look offended. Claire, you should have told me who your father was. None of this would have happened if you'd been honest. I actually laughed. You mean if I had name-dropped his rank like some elite passcode? That's not what honor means. That's not what sacrifice means. You wouldn't understand it if it hit you in the face, which, to be fair, it just did. Meanwhile, Vanessa had started hyperventilating. Please, General Carter, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was a real soldier's daughter. I thought she was trying to blackmail Ethan. I was just trying to protect him. But the military wasn't buying it. Another officer approached with a grim look. Sir, we're in a check. Vanessa Collins is an alias. Real name, Maria Goodman. She's on Interpol's wanted list for financial fraud, identity theft, and international embezzlement. She's been using her position as Ethan Carter's secretary for cover. The crowd exploded in gasps. Ethan's jaw hit the floor. What?
No.
That can't be right. I know Vanessa. She's not, the officer interrupted, showing him a printed dossier. This is her file. Fingerprints match. This woman has been wanted for 6 years. Ethan looked at Vanessa like he'd just seen a ghost. You lied to me? She didn't answer. Her entire world had collapsed in real time. And I couldn't help but think how fitting it was that someone who disrespected sacrifice and honor would fall so fast, so hard. This changes nothing, I said to Ethan, eyes sharp. You enabled her. You watched her mock my father's ashes. You demanded I pay for her damage. The only reason you're not being dragged out of here in handcuffs is because of your father's legacy, which, frankly, you're not even worthy of. Vanessa collapsed to her knees, finally understanding that her threats, her lies, her attitude, it all meant nothing now. I didn't need to raise a hand. I didn't need revenge. Because justice had shown up in full uniform. General Carter nodded at the officers. Take her away. As they dragged her screaming toward the transport vehicle, the general turned back to me. Claire, I want to make this right. I know this can't bring your father back, but whatever the military can do, you name it. I looked down at the shards of the metal still clenched in my bloody hand. I don't want a replacement medal. I want this one. The one he died wearing. The one that tells his story, even in pieces. He nodded solemnly. Then we'll restore it together. Before the ceremony. I nodded back, but my eyes flicked to Ethan, who still stood frozen, eyes vacant, mouth slightly open, like he couldn't believe the world no longer revolved around him. I said nothing more to him. There was nothing left to say. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. It was about making sure my father's sacrifice was never disrespected again. And this was only the beginning. The streets outside Carter Group were completely locked down as if the entire city had hit pause, and I could still feel the weight of 1,000 stares as the military convoy took over. 4 state-of-the-art tanks boxed in the Carter building, each one humming with power, each barrel pointed like a silent warning. Soldiers from the Capital Division had arrived in formation, armed and unsmiling, their presence radiating authority. These weren't fresh recruits, they were decorated veterans, the kind of men who had seen real war, not the kind people like Ethan Carter or Vanessa Collins could even comprehend. General Richard Carter paced forward like a storm in dress blues, flanked by 2 aides and followed by a team of military engineers inspecting the scene. The asphalt still bore traces of my father's ashes. My own hands were stained with both blood and dust, some mine, some his. I stood silently amid the chaos, my body sore, my head spinning, but my posture proud, because I wasn't just my father's daughter anymore, I was the voice that would make sure his sacrifice was never treated like trash again. General Carter stopped directly in front of Ethan, staring him down with a fury I had never seen before, not even during training drills. "Ethan," he said slowly, with terrifying calm, "do you know what it means to disgrace the fallen?" Ethan tried to speak, but choked on his own shame. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The general didn't wait. He turned to the crowd and raised his voice. "For decades, the Carter family has prospered thanks to the protection and sacrifice of men like Captain William Bennett. And yet today, this man's only child returns to the capital with his ashes and Medal of Honor, only to be spat on, insulted, extorted, and threatened by the very people who should have kneeled in gratitude. Where is your conscience?" No one dared answer. The silence was heavy. Even the wind stopped. Then, turning back to Ethan, he added, "Your father may have been my brother in arms, but what you've done today shames his name. You stood there and let someone desecrate a hero's ashes. If your father were alive, he'd disown you." Ethan's face was white as a sheet. He looked like a statue cracked right down the middle. "Claire," General Carter said as he stepped toward me, "you have every right to press charges, demand restitution, or let the military handle this in full force. Say the word, and I'll bury this entire company if that's what justice requires." But I didn't speak immediately. I turned and looked at Vanessa, who was being pinned to the ground by 2 officers. Her wrist was bloodied, her makeup smeared, her eyes still full of venom despite everything. And then I looked at Ethan, this man who once could have been my fiancé, this man who couldn't even recognize integrity when it stood in front of him. "I don't want money," I said clearly. "You asked me how much it would cost to bring my father back. The answer is you can't. No amount of wealth or groveling or staged apologies can reverse what happened here today. But if you think this ends with a few headlines and some crocodile tears, you're wrong. People like her," I nodded toward Vanessa, "they don't get away with dragging our heroes through the mud. Not while I'm breathing." At that moment, Ethan's father, Mr. Jonathan Carter, emerged from the building. He looked exhausted, angry, and older than I remembered. He took one glance at the tanks, then at the shredded metal fragments in my hand, and without hesitation stormed over and slapped Ethan so hard across the face that the crowd gasped. "You absolute disgrace," he hissed. "Get on your knees." Ethan hesitated, but another glare from his father dropped him like a stone. He fell to the pavement in front of me, trembling. "Claire, Mr. Carter said as he turned to me, voice lower but still firm, "Your father was a great man. I loved him like a brother. What my son allowed to happen here is unforgivable. As per an agreement prepared long ago, I offer you 40% equity of Carter Group as a formal apology on behalf of our family. Your father helped build this empire. Half of it is yours by right." He pulled out a share transfer document already signed and pushed it into my hands. "It was supposed to be a symbol of goodwill," he added, "but now it's the least we can do." My fingers curled around the paperwork, stunned. I hadn't expected restitution, I just wanted accountability. But this was legacy. And it wasn't handed to me. It was earned through blood, bone, and silence. I accepted it, not because I wanted control, but because I knew that if my father had been alive, he would have wanted me to stand tall, not just mourn. Meanwhile, Vanessa, who had been half-dragged toward the transport vehicle, suddenly found her voice again. "You're all blind," she screeched.
She planned this.
She used her father's death to worm her way into the company. She framed Mesh just wanted to steal Carter Group. Her madness was unraveling like cheap thread. Before she could say another word, Ethan walked over and stomped on her broken wrist, making her scream in pain. You lied to me for years, he said bitterly. You ruined my life. You're nothing but a con artist. I didn't stop him. I didn't need to. His betrayal was his to carry. I had nothing to prove anymore. Afterward, Ethan turned to me, blood dripping from his forehead where he'd bowed too hard. Claire, he whispered hoarsely, this is what we owe you. What I owe you. I'll make it right. Please let her go. I looked him in the eye, utterly calm. You think this is about her?
No.
This is about every time you could have stopped her and didn't. Every second you watched and said nothing. Every time you chose silence over justice. I don't need your apology, Ethan. I need you to remember this every day for the rest of your life. Mr. Carter slowly helped his son to his feet and walked away. Both men changed forever. The officers escorted Vanessa to the waiting vehicle, and I watched her scream into the void as the door slammed shut. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt satisfied. But all I felt was exhaustion. I had carried my father's ashes across a nation, only to watch them scattered by the cruelest kind of people. But I had also seen them honored by the bravest kind. And somewhere in that chaos, I realized what it meant to protect, not just his memory but the future. General Carter walked back over, his eyes softer now. We'll rebuild the medal together, he said again. Before the ceremony. I nodded. The September 3rd ceremony was days away. And I would walk proudly onto that stage not as a victim, not as a symbol but as my father's daughter. Claire Bennett. And this wasn't the end. This was only the rise. In the days that followed, my body was still covered in healing bruises and bite marks, reminders of the guard dogs that Vanessa had tried to sick on my father's ashes wounds that burned with every movement but also fueled something deeper inside me, something unbreakable. I stayed mostly quiet, spending most of my time in General Carter's private quarters at the military base, where medics treated my injuries and security officers worked tirelessly to restore my father's broken medal. Piece by piece, they cleaned and reassembled it like a sacred puzzle, one that carried the weight of a man who had given everything. General Carter Uncle Richard, as I now called him more freely, stood by me through it all, coordinating not only the restoration of the medal, but also the pending legal process surrounding Vanessa's crimes. She wasn't just facing charges for insulting a war hero or public misconduct. Once the full investigation came to light, she was revealed to be far more than a rude secretary. Vanessa Collins, or rather Maria Goodman, was a globally wanted fugitive. The financial crimes alone would have landed her in prison for decades, but the cherry on top was what she did to my father's remains. Desecrating a martyr's legacy wasn't just criminal, it was unforgivable. The court system didn't waste time. She was sentenced to the harshest punishment possible under national law, death penalty. And the verdict dropped just one day before the September 3rd military parade. When I got the notification, I was silent for a long time. Not happy. Not relieved.
Just. Still.
Some part of me had hoped for closure, but this didn't feel like that. I had seen her screaming and cursing as she was dragged away in cuffs. I had seen Ethan fall apart in front of the whole city. I had watched Mr. Carter kneel in the dirt, beg forgiveness, and hand over the future of Carter Group in a desperate bid to honor a debt written in blood. But none of that brought my father back. Still, there were things to do, responsibilities to carry. The equity transfer was official now, and with the group partially under my name, I had no choice but to step into the boardroom, at least temporarily. My mother, CEO of Brightwell Industries, called me from overseas the night I signed the agreement. She was calm as ever, but I could sense the emotion behind her words. Claire, she said, you've always been your father's daughter. You carry his spine, his fire. I didn't want this life for you. But now that it's here, use it. Use the Carter Group to anchor yourself. You don't have to stay in the military if it breaks you. There are other ways to serve, to lead. Her voice cracked near the end. I knew she was trying to say that she didn't want to lose me too. That after losing my dad, she was afraid of waking up one day to find my name on a monument as well. I didn't give her an answer right away. I wasn't ready to choose.
Not yet.
So we agreed to meet again after the ceremony. I would represent our family at the parade, then we'd talk about everything else. I had no idea what that everything would include, but I knew one thing for sure. No amount of pain, chaos, or scandal would stop me from standing tall in front of the world on September 3rd. And when that day arrived, it was like the entire nation held its breath. I stood on the main platform in full uniform, the repaired first-class Medal of Honor gleaming on my chest beside my own second-class medal, the one I'd earned on my last mission overseas, when a blast nearly took my life. The sun shone fiercely above us, the flags fluttered, the aircraft soared in perfect sync overhead, and the ground beneath me trembled with the footsteps of thousands of servicemen and women marching in unison. I stood at the front, head high, back straight, every movement deliberate. This wasn't for show. This was for my father, for Captain William Bennett, for every drop of blood he spilled to keep this country safe. I knew he was with me. I could feel him in the breeze. I could almost hear him laugh deep, rumbling and warm, like he used to when I was a little girl struggling to hold up a wooden rifle during our backyard drills. The memory hit me so hard my eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't blink. I couldn't. Not here. Not today. As the ceremony reached its peak, the moment of honor was announced. My name was called. I walked forward, heels striking the stage, the medal clutched in both hands, and stood before the President of the United States. Cameras from every network were trained on us. The country was watching. My voice didn't tremble when I spoke into the microphone. This medal doesn't just belong to me. It belongs to the man who gave me everything. My father, Captain William Bennett. This is his light, not mine. I'm just holding it so the world doesn't forget who he was. The applause that followed was thunderous. Some people cried. Others saluted. And me? I just stood there, finally breathing like the weight of 1,000 storms had left my chest. After the ceremony ended, I left the stage, still dazed from it all, when I heard a familiar voice call out, "Claire?" I turned and saw my mother walking toward me, elegant, composed, and tearful. But beside her was a man I hadn't seen in over a decade. He was tall, handsome, dressed in a dark suit, but walked with the unmistakable stride of a soldier. I shook his hand instinctively, and the moment our palms touched, I paused. Calluses. Not the gym kind, the battlefield kind. I looked up. "You're military." He smiled, warm and boyish. "You don't remember me, huh?" I blinked, confused. "Should I?" He grinned. "I'm Daniel Carter. My father might have mentioned Mayhay helped you out a few days ago." I froze, replaying the name. Daniel. Uncle Richard's son. My childhood friend. The one who used to race me in the backyard while our dads talked war stories over beer and grilled burgers. The one who used to carry my backpack when I twisted my ankle in training camp at age 12. I stared at him, stunned. "You've grown up," I said, half laughing. "So did you," he replied. "Except now you're the hero everyone looks up to." We didn't stop smiling the rest of the day. Something clicked then, not just recognition, but something deeper, something that felt like home. Like maybe my story wasn't just about grief and justice. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for something more. Something healing. Something real. And as I walked beside him that afternoon, metal around my neck, wind in my hair, and peace in my chest for the first time in years, I dared to believe that even after everything, even after the ashes and the war and the betrayal, love unexpected, steady, and strong might just be waiting at the finish line. After the ceremony, everything changed, but not in the way people expect when they see a girl standing on national television with 2 medals on her chest and a tank convoy behind her. It wasn't like I suddenly became invincible or untouchable, or that the world suddenly decided to bow at my feet. No, the truth was quieter, subtler, and somehow more overwhelming. For the first time in my life, people saw me for who I really was, not just the daughter of Captain William Bennett, not just the woman who refused to bow to corporate bullies, not just the soldier who slapped back when her father's ashes were disrespected, but Claire, the woman who had survived every explosion life threw at her and still stood tall. It was strange having the spotlight shift from scandal to honor. Overnight, headlines changed. Reporters who had previously tried to twist my story were now using words like national symbol, modern hero, embodiment of legacy. Social media was flooded with clips from the parade, photos of my medals, slow-motion shots of the moment I saluted in front of the president. Hashtags like Daughter of Valor and Claire Bennett started trending. But while everyone was caught up in the public version of my story, I was still living the private one, the version filled with long silent nights at the military base, sitting cross-legged on my cot, slowly polishing the repaired pieces of my father's medal over and over like it was the only thing keeping me anchored to the ground. It had taken days of delicate restoration, patience, and specialized tools to return the shattered fragments to their original shape. I refused the suggestion to melt it down and reforge it into something newer, something cleaner. That metal had scars now, just like me, and every jagged edge told the truth. Uncle Richard had watched quietly as I pieced it back together night after night, and when I finally placed the last piece, he didn't say a word, just saluted me and left the room. But I knew he was proud, and I knew my father would have been too. In the days following the parade, I also began integrating into Carter Group's management team, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. After Ethan and his father formally handed over 40% equity, it wasn't just a symbolic gesture anymore. I had real power and real responsibilities. It was surreal walking into the boardroom and seeing men in suits who had once dismissed me now standing when I entered, calling me Miss Bennett, with respect they hadn't offered me when I was just the girl with ashes in her hands. I didn't enjoy the corporate world, not even for a second, but I knew I had to be there for now. For my mother. For myself. For everyone watching to see if I'd fall. But amidst all of that chaos, the one quiet, unexpected constant was Daniel. He wasn't just some flash from my childhood anymore. He showed up every day without fail. Sometimes with coffee. Sometimes with lunch. Sometimes with nothing but silence and presence. And somehow, that was more comforting than anything else. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't push. He just existed beside me in a way that didn't feel like pressure. It felt like peace. The kind of peace I hadn't known since before my father died. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing. About our old backyard games. About how we both hated spinach. About the weight of being raised by heroes and the guilt that came with failing to live up to them. I found myself laughing more, breathing easier, even daring to imagine a future that wasn't weighed down by the past. My mother noticed the change immediately. When we finally met again in person, she hugged me tighter than she ever had before. "You're glowing," she whispered. "Is it the parade? Or is it the boy walking 10 steps behind you like he's already guarding your 6? I rolled my eyes, but I didn't deny it. For once, she didn't tease me. Instead, she looked at me with pride and said, "Maybe you finally found someone who understands the war behind your smile." That stuck with me. And maybe that's why I wasn't surprised when, a few weeks later, Daniel took me to a quiet rooftop overlooking the Washington skyline and pulled out a small velvet box. There were no fireworks, no crowd, no grand monologue. Just him, his calloused hands, and a promise spoken in a voice low and steady. "Claire, you've already been through the worst kind of fire. Let me be the peace that follows it." I didn't cry. I didn't freeze. I just nodded. Because I already knew. He wasn't asking me to stop being a soldier. He wasn't trying to tame me or change me. He was offering to walk beside me, no matter how long the battlefield stretched. Our wedding was scheduled for spring. Small, private, nothing extravagant. But on that day, I placed my father's restored medal on the front row, right where his seat would have been. The rest of the chair was empty, but in my heart, it wasn't. I could almost hear his laugh again. See him raising a glass from afar, proud and teasing as always. "You did good, kid," he'd say. "You finally found her fight and you won it." And I'd smile and whisper back, "I found my peace too, Dad. And I finally feel whole." Our wedding wasn't some elaborate political event or military spectacle. It was just ours, intimate and quiet, with close friends, a few old comrades, and the people who had stood by me when the rest of the world either pitied me or attacked me. The venue was a restored war memorial garden, not far from where my father's name had been etched into stone, and as the sun filtered through the trees, I could feel him everywhere, in the breeze brushing against my veil, in the medals pinned across the chests of guests in uniform, in the silence between the vows when Daniel looked into my eyes, and I knew, without a single doubt, that I wasn't alone anymore. Before the ceremony, I placed my father's medal on the chair we saved for him in the front row. It gleamed in the sunlight, cracked but whole, just like me. And when I looked at it, I didn't feel pain anymore. I felt pride, the kind that burns slow and deep and warm. After the vows, after the rings, after Daniel kissed me with so much tenderness, I thought I might shatter again for a completely different reason. I walked over to that chair, lifted my champagne glass, and whispered under my breath, "We made it, Dad." And I swear, for just a second, I felt a hand on my shoulder, light and steady like it had always been, and I knew that wherever he was, he saw me. But peace, as I'd come to learn, didn't mean the end of challenge. It just meant I had stronger hands to hold mine when they came. After the honeymoon, I stepped back into the boardroom, this time not just as the temporary heir of Carter Group, but as its co-leader. Mr. Jonathan Carter had formally retired and passed the remainder of his shares to Daniel, who made it clear from day one that I wasn't there as a figurehead. I was his equal, in every way. Together, we overhauled the entire structure, eliminating the corrupt branches, reassigning old loyalists, and rebuilding the company on values that wouldn't crumble under scandal. There were skeptics, of course, men who couldn't believe a military woman with a scarred hand and 0 business degrees could sit at the head of the table. But those skeptics went quiet fast, especially when quarterly profits skyrocketed and headlines changed from scandal-ridden empire to the Bennett-Carter revival. It wasn't easy. Mornings blurred into nights, arguments were had, deals fell through, and once or twice I nearly walked away entirely. But Daniel was always there, hand on my lower back, eyes steady, whispering, "You've survived worse. And you've got me." And I did. We both did. I hadn't expected love to feel like a battle fought together, not a battlefield of wounds and bloodshed, but of effort, of choosing each other every single day, even when life pulled us in different directions. I guess that's what happens when two people raised by soldiers fall in love. You don't run from fire, you run into it together. Meanwhile, Maria Goodman was officially tried, and her sentence was carried out swiftly. She had attempted to appeal, of course, clinging to whatever scraps of privilege she thought she had left, but none of it mattered. Her crimes weren't just against me or my father. They were against the legacy of every soldier she disrespected, every victim she defrauded, every truth she tried to rewrite with a smile and a designer handbag. When I received the official confirmation that her execution had been completed, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't cheer. I just stood still, staring at the letter, and nodded to myself. Justice didn't always feel good. Sometimes it just felt necessary. Ethan Carter, on the other hand, had vanished from the public eye completely. After everything, he withdrew from all business and social engagements, took off overseas, and, according to Daniel's quiet updates, had entered a veteran mental health program after suffering what could only be described as a full psychological collapse. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't pity him either. I just hoped he finally saw the truth that silence in the face of injustice is its own kind of betrayal, and that real strength comes not from power, but from humility. As the 1-year anniversary of the parade approached, invitations flooded in. People wanted me to give speeches, to pose for magazine covers, to join military promotional campaigns. I declined almost all of them. I wasn't a symbol, I was just someone who refused to back down when her father's legacy was trampled. Still, I agreed to speak at one event, the National Remembrance for Fallen Heroes. I stood on that same platform again, this time not trembling, not uncertain, but sure. I told them the truth that medals are not decorations, they are gravestones. That soldiers don't die for applause, they die for peace. And that if this country forgets them, even for a second, we've already lost more than a war. We've lost our soul. The applause was quiet, respectful. And that night, Daniel and I visited my father's final resting place together. I wore no uniform, just a soft blue dress and sandals. He carried a small bouquet of white roses, and I brought the medal polished, untouched since the ceremony. We stood there in silence, hand in hand, and I felt no tears rise this time. Just peace. Just fullness. Just the echo of a voice in my head saying, "You're home now." A week later, Daniel surprised me again. He handed me a letter my father had written before his final mission, something he had entrusted to Uncle Richard with strict orders to give to me only when I found my own path. I opened it that night on our porch, under the stars, my head resting against Daniel's shoulder. The handwriting was familiar, a little messy, a little rushed, but strong. Claire, it read, if you're reading this, it means you survived. And I hope you found someone who looks at you like your heart is something worth protecting. You were never meant to be small, baby girl. You were meant to shake the world. If I'm gone, know this, I never left. I'm in every step you take. And I'm proud. Always proud. Love you forever, Dad. I cried. Of course I did. And Daniel held me through it. Didn't say a word, just let me cry until the stars blurred. And in that moment, I realized something I had never said out loud until then. I wasn't broken. I wasn't haunted. I wasn't the girl who had to fight tooth and nail just to be heard. I was a woman who had risen from ashes, from grief, from betrayal. I was my father's legacy and my mother's strength and Daniel's future, all wrapped into one. And this story? It wasn't about tragedy. It was about triumph, about rebuilding, reclaiming, and rising. And no matter what the world threw at me next, I knew I'd face it head on with medals on my chest, fire in my heart, and love by my side.